You know what's frustrating about managing security as an MSP? It's knowing that even after you've reviewed a system, firewall, or endpoint to make sure it's secure, it can still change the next day and you might never find out. Let me tell you, that sucks. That's why I want to tell you about LionGuard. See, some vendors talk about being a single pane of glass, but LionGuard actually delivers. They pull data from over 70 systems, use automation to detect changes, and alert you about the things that matter via a ticket in your PSA. If you truly want to secure your customers, visit msspalert.com/LionGuard to check it out for yourself or sign up for a demo today.
All right, welcome back to Cyber for Hire, the Managed Security Podcast. Once again, I'm Bradley Barth with SC Media. In the first half of our show, we talked about shielding yourself from the dangers of remote monitoring and management software compromises. Right now, I'd like to welcome back my co-host Ryan Morris from Morris Management Partners, because it's time for us to examine our MSSP industry topic of the day, presenting our big idea in business: optimizing your MSSP support desk. Network difficulties can crop up at any time, as can possible attacks, and companies like having the reassurance that at a moment's notice they can reach out to their MSSP for help. So this segment is going to look at how managed security service providers can operate a top-notch, responsive support desk that meets or exceeds their clients' needs through best practices and policies, optimal workflows, and automated tools. So Ryan, welcome back to the conversation. Let's start by you maybe painting a picture for me of what an ideal help desk or support desk looks like.
You know, the ideal standard that we're all trying to get to in the industry is as close to real-time response for every customer outreach as possible, right? We're trying to get that as close to zero as we can, and then a resolution time as close to zero in a separate calculation as physically or realistically possible. I've yet to see that happen in the real world. I understand the objective that we're trying to get to, but it's not just a question of the speed of reaction or connection, but also a speed of resolution. And so I think those two things can be measured and optimized in a separate approach. And I think that is where we can get some real promise of value for our customers. Remember, just because I took less than 2 rings to get a hold of a human in a call center for anything that I'm trying to do in the world, doesn't mean that I got an instant or satisfactory resolution to the problem that I was calling for in the first place. So bragging about your time to connection, I mean, that's nice, but that doesn't actually increase customer satisfaction or net promoter scores that we might be tracking across the industry. So remember, from a business perspective, what we're looking for is the outcome, not the input. Not just call volume and call connection time, but call resolution and then successful outcomes that yield good customer satisfaction reflected in your net promoter score. That's the thing we're ultimately trying to get to here. And there's human factors, there's process factors, and there's technology factors that we can leverage to improve on both sides of that conversation.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, we just looked at the sort of the after picture of what an ideal help desk looks like. Let's go back to the before picture. So before it's truly optimized, let's look at some of the problems sometimes, the most common ones that a help desk can experience. What are some of the most common complaints that, an MSP is going to want to address if they really are going to make sure they have a smoothly running help desk operation?
Again, we take it for granted that everybody says, I am MSP, therefore I am 24/7. And yet that's ironically nowhere near the top of the list of complaints that we hear from customers about the service they receive. As long as it's clearly established and communicated, if we have, an 8x5 expectation, if we have a 10x5, we see that very often so that we can cover the coasts as the time zones shift across the U.S. Or if we are doing international operations, we might have an 8x5 by time zone type of a coverage model. 24/7 is the default that everybody assumes is necessary. What customers are much more likely to complain about is a rapid access to an agent who isn't qualified to solve my problem, right? That's the number one complaint. And therefore, I think that's what we ought to be solving for. If you think about this from a business perspective, peel back the P&L in any MSP operation, and in literally 99% of the cases, the largest single category of expense in business operation is humans, not technology, not facilities, not automated resources. The idea that we started with, just throw 1,000 pounds of solution at a 5-pound problem in order to get to the best response time, the best resolution time, the broadest coverage window, you just throw humans at it. That's incredibly expensive, right? More people on your team does not necessarily equal better service for your customer, but it also leads to an inevitable increase of expense. As a result, we've seen a lot of creative approaches to doing that, right? It can be 1099ing everybody and they work from their home location and they're only paid for when they are actively on the clock. We've seen offshoring where it stays quote unquote near shore, right? From a developer's point of view, we see the majority of outsourcing going to India, to Nepal, to Ukraine, to a lot of places that are very far off of home time zone. But when it comes to a support factor, we're seeing a significant shift and a very aggressive human resources recruiting trend going on in South and Central America. Peru is a destination where, they're very similar in time zone to North America, highly educated, highly technical skilled population that obviously has a different economic base. So we're seeing a ton of outsourcing that goes on there. But for all of those human answers that we see happening, you could throw 10,000 humans at it and still not deliver good quality service if the escalations, the notifications, and the process elements are not very carefully scripted. So I think that's really where in the next couple of years, we're going to see the vast majority of enhancement and improvement. It's not just more bodies, and it's not just more inexpensive bodies. It is the careful orchestration of who is the first line of response, what are they qualified to actually respond to, how and when do we manage the escalation and the handoff so that the latent knowledge comes with the customer and we don't have to re-explain it to every new agent that we get to, and then which parts of that need to be further escalated to a specialty tier so that it might take longer than the body of the call to achieve resolution for the customer.
Certainly. So, I would say, since you've already you started to segue there anyway, let's dig a little bit deeper by addressing how to fix some of these complaints through a combination of people, process, and technology. So you started even talking a little bit about the people aspect of things. So let's start with that for the people who are manning the help desk, who sort of are the first layer or the first line of defense. How should they be qualified? What kinds of training should they receive? And then, since you brought up escalation, which also brings a little process into it, what would be your best practice recommendation on when it's the right time to actually escalate and having that option available?
To your first part of the question, I think that the wrongest approach that we've ever seen is every customer gets always access to an escalated agent, right? We've seen a lot of people in a specialty type model brag about their capability that at any point in time, you will have one-touch access to a tier 2, tier 3 type of escalation engineer. That's just overkill, right? My first assumption from everything we've learned across the industry is that level 1 means level one, right? When we get the vast majority of things that come through, it doesn't require access to a core engineer who can, read, write scripting and code inside the application to resolve a problem for a customer. That's special. It needs to be rare, and therefore it can justify being very expensive. I think the innovation in the front line is what's going to be very interesting, especially to borrow from a related trend in the industry as we leverage generative AI for intelligent chatbot capabilities, right? We're all very familiar with the chatbot on most websites out there in a customer service environment. Many MSPs have also been doing this, right? Standard body of FAQs and an automated agent. Hi, welcome to MSP dot whatever. And what can I help you with? That's not a human, right? That's an automated agent that is responding to you in most cases, and they're quote unquote qualified to respond to a very limited set of where are you located and what are your office hours and stuff like that. Chatbot multiplied by an internal deployment of something like ChatGPT or any of the emerging competitors to that technology. If you can train that AI on your internal technology, I'm going to be fascinated to see just how many level one requests we can resolve with zero human intervention. I don't think we're anywhere near that yet. Let me be careful to say that, but I am interested to see how that can go. For the front line of humans that we are hiring, my interpretation is that raises the bar on training and qualification, right? Today, my first response in a non-AI type world, you don't need rocket scientists to solve non-rocket science problems. So we need to stop perhaps being quite so precious about the qualifications, right? Does it require a 4-year degree, an advanced degree, 5 to 10 years of experience in industry to help people reset their passwords? No. It does not. And we need to make sure that we are recruiting appropriately for the expectation. In this near future, I think that we can reserve our humans for that higher tier of things that AI cannot address. But 80% of the things that we get asked by our customers in a help desk environment can be addressed by AI if we train it appropriately and monitor the tone and that it doesn't get rude or snarky to our customers, right? We're all a little bit amused by some of the growing pains. But right now, in your environment, there are plenty of highly qualified human beings who haven't spent day one in a university environment, that can be trained on industry standards, that can be continuously educated on updates and trends and things that are going on, and that can be supported by a robust internal deployment of a knowledge base, right? I think help desks will get better when we do that kind of continuous learning without requiring excessive levels of qualification, but we enhance that with training for the human skills, right? Like the you and me, I can have a conversation politely in an engaging way without being just an automaton of rudeness that speaks back to our customers. I think that's where we're going to see a lot of the innovation. Stay tuned for how cool it could get with a generative AI behind the chatbot. I wonder just how much we can solve with that technology.
Automaton of rudeness. I like that phrase a lot. I'm going to try to use that as much as possible. You certainly don't want to be.
It could be a good band name as well. So
it definitely sounds like a good band name. Yeah, I mean,
if heavy metal, might be screamo.
If you're talking to a chatbot and you're saying, "How do I solve this problem?" and their answer is, kill all humans, then we know that we haven't quite reached yet the point at which the AI chatbots can
Hal has entered the chat.
Right. But you did read my mind because I was going to ask you about that in terms of the use of chatbots and AI and ways that you can automate the process a little bit more. And then do you start to incorporate still that friendly human voice and face. And I think that makes sense to reserve that for the escalation or the second tier. Let's also go back to policy for a minute, because you had mentioned early on some things about metrics and what you really should be measuring, and maybe the number of rings that it takes to answer a call isn't really or shouldn't really be at the top of your list of what's really the most important key performance indicator. Which then begs the question: what is, what should be really the top scoring metrics that you should be monitoring to see whether or not your help desk is as efficient as you would like it to be.
I think there are some very interesting sub metrics that we're learning from some large scale help desks that can be very efficiently applied down into the mass marketplace, right? Whether it's me and a buddy, or we've got 1,000 agents in a help desk, there's some really good learning that we can apply. I think think about it like the life cycle of a customer resolution. Okay, there is problem, there is notification, there is engagement, there is alignment, there is response, there is resolution, and there's validation. Right, and if you want to replay that little segment of the commentary, you can get a very good breakdown of the life cycle from. Sometimes the customer is not the first one to know that a problem happened, and proactive notification is a problem. But when they reach out to us, what they care about is, okay, how long did it take to get in touch with someone, quote unquote, someone, to let them know that I'm having a problem? How soon after the connection did they actually accurately understand my problem? And that's not an insignificant question, because for those of you who have spent time explaining and re-explaining and escalating to just get to the point where somebody goes, oh, I understand what you're saying and what your problem actually is, time to alignment, where the customer agrees, yep, you've got it. You understand what the what my problem is, and B, what the root cause is. That's a very important metric. And then we move to, I'm working on it. I'm making progress. If it's a complex scenario, I've successfully resolved this thing. Can you verify for me that you actually are no longer having that problem? I think taking a life cycle approach like that, and then aggregating each of the metrics so we can identify where in the old Henry Ford sense of things, if there is a plug in the pipe of progress as we go through, we can resolve that urgently, but then also being able to identify trends and best practices, and then aggregating out to something that is completely non-technical, to a net promoter score. I think that is the higher level that a help desk needs to be measured by. You could respond quickly, you could align quickly, you could solve the problem for the customer, and you could still have very unhappy customers who talk smack about you to their friends. That's I don't care how quickly you resolve things. If we didn't yield a net promoter score improvement, then you're not doing your job effectively. So I think that's where we need to raise our game and move things forward. Excellent, guys. So Bradley, thank you for the setup and the conversation there, because this is, again, a massive chunk of business expense. It's not just an important activity that we provide, it is a very expensive activity. It would behoove us all to get better at it. So that will be our conversation about the big idea in business. What are your thoughts? Obviously, there's a lot more that we can learn from the community, so please send us in your thoughts and your insights. We've got more of our weekly news countdown coming, but first, we want to move into a segment here that on the program we refer to as Dear Cyber for Hire. This is an advice column segment where we get to play marriage counselor between MSPs and their clients to help mend the fences when necessary and to fix things when stuff goes awry in the relationship. The following letter that we're going to introduce is dramatized for your entertainment, but also to anonymize and protect for the individuals who are experiencing this. But believe us, this is a real world conflict that is experienced by many of you out there every day, and we want to help you resolve it. So, Bradley, let me shift it back over to you. What is the relationship we can address today?
Well, this is a good one, Ryan. As always, another big dose of MSSP melodrama for everyone. This one comes from the provider side of the relationship. So, guys, cue the music. Dear Cyber for Hire, I fear my relationship has entered a death spiral. Okay, maybe I'm exaggerating just a bit, but if you think I'm prone to hyperbole, you should hear my client partner. They're constantly making mountains out of molehills, insisting that every ticket they put in is a high priority ticket. Fine, maybe not every ticket, but enough to drive me and my team crazy. This steady stream of hair on fire requests results in our team needing to come up with on-the-fly solutions, only to later find out that a simpler alternative would have been available if only the client had waited for additional facts to come to light. How do I let the client know I truly care about their success, while also encouraging them to maintain their patience and sanity? Hysterically yours, Run Ragged in Reno. Ryan, a pretty fitting one considering it ties in so nicely to the help desk topic we just presented, not even on purpose, just fortuitous timing there. What's your take on this? How do we solve this problem?
Hysterically indeed. And again, as a person who has lived in the front line for many years of customer relations, customer account management, the non-technical side of those relationships, I can sympathize with both sides of the conversation here. As a customer, if I say jump, I expect people to say how high because I'm paying for a service. And of course, I wouldn't waste your time as a service provider unless I believed that my problem was deadly serious. But I think we have a problem in cybersecurity, right? And it comes from this evolution out of a technical nerd-only conversation into the mainstream everybody conversation. For many years as an industry, we've been trying to raise the awareness level of cybersecurity challenges and convince people, hey, we're not freaking out over here for no reason. This stuff actually matters. We crossed a Rubicon in the last year or a couple of years where not only does the world agree with us that, you know what, yes, cybersecurity is important and it is something that we deal with, but now we've gotten into the chicken little sky is falling part of the conversation, especially with clients who are not specialists, who are not the professionals that are involved in these relationships. I also see an unfortunate amount of internal, what I will call escalation enhancement for the sake of job security and justification, right? If I am your cybersecurity provider and nothing bad ever happens, no fires are ever started, no problems need to be resolved. I mean, there comes a point where a reasonable cost manager in a business environment might look at this sideways and say, wait a minute, why are we paying for these services if nothing bad ever happens? And, you know, I can recite the speech to you from A Few Good Men. You want us on that wall. You need us on that wall. I think that we get some bad behavior that is enhanced by the provider side, whether that's an internal IT department or us as an external service provider. And it tends to have this reinforcing spiral effect with the customer who feels like, you know, I got a notice of one bad file in my malware scan. And of course, it's the end of the world. You need to stop doing everything you're doing so that you can resolve this. I get it, right? I understand that we need to take this stuff seriously, but as the old piece of philosophy says, if everything is priority number one, then nothing is priority number one. We need to be very keen to communicate with our customers about exactly what qualifies as a level 5. We're not stopping what we're doing type of a problem to a level 1, oh my God, everything needs to stop because we're literally on fire here. We need to establish the criteria. We need to let the customer participate in the development of the criteria, and then we need to communicate that criteria very consistently, very frequently, and then apply the criteria and make sure that we are validating, we are not unnecessarily escalating things throughout the process. Bradley, I'm sure you know from a business point of view or from a technical point of view, if you remember back to the days of the Franklin planner, right? The Franklin Covey days of flipping through the pages and writing down your tasks for the day. And pretty soon everything was either an A number 1 or it had an arrow next to it that you used to just forward it to the next day because I was swamped with too many A1s. And then that moved into our BlackBerry world. And then it moved into all of our other task planning world. As humans, we are very unreliable sources of urgency about our own problems. We default to both radical ends of the spectrum. Everything is either, it's not a big deal, don't even worry about it, and we never get to it until the house is on fire, or the house is on fire and you absolutely must deal with it now. I personally think to fix the relationship here, we just need to get in the same room with our customer and let's re-establish the criteria and do this, ideally, as a workshop where we can sit down and say, let's tune our notification system and response protocols to your individual requirements as a business. Asterisk, editorial note, I'm not suggesting you have a different one for each of your customers. What I am suggesting is you make them feel like this is custom service that follows your best practices.
For sure. Bottom line, get your priorities in order realistically. If you've ever worked on a project, right, and you had 2 people working together and one of them is that sort of classic type A model and someone else is that classic type B laid back model, sometimes it works and sometimes it's just like oil and water and it's just like for one, everything is panic, hair on fire situation. The other person, it's chill, we're good, we got time. And it's fun sometimes to see what comes out of those meetings and like who's ready to who's ready to quit first.
And just so everybody knows, this is not unique to cybersecurity. It's not unique to technology help desk. You remember the show The Odd Couple? Right. Believe me, it's endemic in the technology of being a human that we have these problems.
For sure. Well, hopefully our listeners have learned from this and won't make the same mistakes. And remember, if you've been struggling with your managed security services relationship, whether you're the user or the provider, we want to hear from you. So please write to us at cyberforhire@cyberriskalliance.com, and we might use your letter in a future episode. Now, as any security practitioner can tell you, there's no shortage of headlines filling up the cyber news feeds every single day. And so we wanted to highlight a few items that we curated just for you. So we present to you the security detail. Starting off with headline number 1 for you, Ryan, changes in the Twitter 2-factor authentication policy will affect non-subscribers and require a third-party solution. Take it away.
Thanks, Twitter, for making our jobs even more interesting. This is an announcement, came from the Twitterverse, where they said if you are not a blue check subscriber and paying them a subscription fee, then you will no longer have access to text-based alerts or the responses when you log into your account to validate it is actually you that's going into that account. Now, that sounds horrifying to me from a only certain special people get access to security point of view. That just really seems to rub my logic the wrong way. But when you get inside the numbers, there's 2 statistics that I think are absolutely fascinating. Statistic 1, only 2.6% of Twitter users actually use Twitter 2FA. That's ridiculous, and that's not acceptable. No wonder so many people's accounts get hacked. Please, people, let's use 2FA. And if it needs to be a third party through Google, through Microsoft, through your preferred provider, cool. That ought to be a service that we provide as MSSPs. The second statistic, if you will, if you look at the job description or the nature of the human beings who are actually on Twitter every single day, for however many million of them still actually use the service, given the way that things are evolving over there, 95+% of those users are non-technical professionals. These are salespeople, marketing people, business executives, you and me, and entertainment professionals and celebrities. These are, by definition, people who do not know what 2FA stands for, and that's probably why 97.5% of them don't use the capability. That's a freakishly glaring gap in our security protocols. You know Twitter's out there in your customer's environment. You know the non-technical users are using it. Standard operating procedure, no business user on a device under management in your service environment is allowed to use Twitter unless they go through your prescribed 2FA. Headline number 2, a good threat hunter is hard to find. Bradley, what do we need to know?
Well, it's a survey-based study that was conducted by the Cyber Risk Alliance, which found that security leaders and professionals are struggling to find experienced and specialized threat hunters for their security operations, and in a lot of cases blaming lack of funding to acquire the level of skilled expertise that's hard to find out there, like being fluent in data forensics and analytics and things of that nature. 53% of respondents who are planning to implement a threat hunting program in the next 12 months said they were concerned about lack of qualified staff to properly conduct the threat hunting. On the plus side, 32% of the 200 plus respondents said they are at least currently implementing a threat hunting program. So just, interesting trends to look out for. Another notable trend, a lot of them seem to have the infrastructure in place to do real-time detection of threats, things like, EDR and SIMs. But of course, threat hunting is really supposed to be more proactive. And so as a result, with those lacking the threat hunting capabilities, they find themselves constantly playing catch up to the threats that are outpacing them. So obviously an MSSP that does have legitimate threat hunting capabilities certainly could be one answer for those clients and could make you, if you're an MSSP with those capabilities, that could be a key differentiator for you in a highly competitive market. So that would be that headline right there. Next one for you, Ryan. Healthcare data breach volume increases over pre-pandemic levels and affecting more individuals.
This is a case of good news, bad news. What we find in a study that was just released about the second half of 2022 in healthcare data breach, it's put out by a group based in Seattle called Critical Insights. What they tell us, good news, the actual numbers are down second half versus first half. Hopefully that indicates that we might have seen a peak in terms of the quantity of activities. But bad news, we're actually getting more impactful penetrations that are affecting more users, more records, more disclosure of data. I think one of the interesting things that we saw in this news item is that while the attackers continue in quantity to go after hospitals and healthcare clinics, et cetera, the actual effectiveness of this is bleeding outside of the institutions themselves and into their third-party partners, right? In the second half of 2022, data breaches and records that were exposed due to breaches at business associates of healthcare institutions were more common than those at actual healthcare institutions. Third-party diligence is absolutely mission critical. We need to make sure that we are not getting lazy. We're building good systems. We're deploying them inside the hospital. But the hospital deals with very many people in their business side activities, and that is where the bulk of the breaches actually came from in the second half of 2022. So please pay attention to the third party in the healthcare environment. Fourth headline for us then, Bradley, on your side. Researchers have created an exploit for a critical Fortinet NAT flaw, and we need to know about this. What do we need to know?
Well, MSSP partners of Fortinet are urged to patch immediately after researchers unveiled a proof of concept exploit for a critical vulnerability that was discovered in Fortinet's Fortinac network access control suite. It basically involves the weaponization of some previous archive vulnerability issues that allow for an arbitrary file write. So the vendor warned that it could be leveraged by an unauthenticated attacker to essentially write arbitrary files on the system and achieve remote code execution with the highest privileges. So basically, this is a heads up to those who may be using this product. Certainly, we have more information on the vulnerability itself and the exploit that was created from it. Look up that information on our show notes page for the latest details. And then, of course, patch urgently. And so with that, that's going to take us to, drumroll please, our irrelevant news item of the week. Now, this is a real news pitch that Ryan and I have received in our inboxes for reasons that are entirely inexplicable to us. But we'll still see if somehow maybe we can make it about cybersecurity. Sometimes we can, sometimes we can't. So are you ready, Ryan?
I am ready.
Okay, well then here comes the pitch. Excited to share that Alchemy 43, the cosmetic microtreatment and aesthetics brand, founded by CEO Nikki Levy, opens today in Corona Del Mar, marking the brand's first home in Orange County, California, in Newport Beach. Alchemy 43 offers a range of minimally invasive treatments customized to each client's goals, such as Botox, Juvederm, other fillers, oxygenating facial treatments, mini neck peels, micropenning, etc., etc. Now, normally, Ryan, the only injections that we would be talking about in our profession are sequel injections. I will tell you off the bat that my rule of thumb is, and at least this is the case for today, if you want to treat the outside of my face, fine. If you want to inject something into my face, probably going to pass. Now, again, I may not have all the facts. Maybe my view will change over time if I start seeing some things in the mirror that I really don't like. So how about you, Ryan? Not that you need it, but let's say maybe in a few decades, you're noticing some lines you gotta get rid of. Would you try Botox? Also, let's say you're a company or the MSSP representing a company that's suffering from bad cyber hygiene, which can certainly lead to some very unsightly security blemishes. Under what circumstances can these hygiene problems be fixed relatively non-invasively? And when is major reconstructive surgery needed? So those are my two questions that I pose to you.
See, now I think you have just written a killer marketing campaign for a cybersecurity firm, right? Not everything we do has to be major intrusive surgery. We can do some cosmetic things that improve the posture of security for an end user organization and their individuals, and make sure that not only are they good at security, but that they put forward their best face to their client. I don't know. I think if you and I were to workshop this one for a little bit, we could come up with a pretty killer ad campaign. And at the end of that ad campaign, naturally, field trip to Orange County, especially considering the 18 inches of fresh snow that's on my patio outside right now. Let's all go to Southern California and get some facial treatments. like you, I'm of the opinion if you're going to inject anything into my physical body, I might want to see a medical degree associated with that service. And just like in the cybersecurity industry, if you're going to be doing anything intrusive in our network environment, you shouldn't just be any Tom, Dick, or Harry out there. You ought to actually be certified, credentialed professional in the cyber environment. And many of our competitors these days, you could be an MSSP just by claiming that you are an MSSP. We need to put some diplomas on the wall, as it were, and let's ensure that this is not just a strip mall, casual hourly employee type of service that you are getting from your cybersecurity service provider. So I think there's a shocking amount of parallels between their industry and ours, and we all take it very personally when it's our own bodies that are in question. Maybe we ought to take it equally as personally when it is our network in question.
Very true, Ryan. Very true. Well, we're certainly not afraid to inject our opinions when it comes to things related to cybersecurity, but I think the rest of our opinions are going to have to wait for future episodes because, alas, we're out of time. But don't worry, we'll be back again soon for episode number 11. Meanwhile, feel free to check out even more cybersecurity podcast content on the SC Media, MSSP Alert, and Channel E2E websites. Until next time, I'm Bradley Barth.
And I am Ryan Morris. Please reach out to us via our show page and our email address with your comments, questions, and insights about today's episode and about the continuing business of cybersecurity. We will keep the conversation going on the next episode of Cyber for Hire, your inside source for cyber outsourcing.